Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Black Off Radio. This is Len Osanic, and we are at sunny Waikiki, Honolulu. And we are joined today by Dr. Mark DeValk. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Len. Thank you for having me here in lovely Honolulu.
We've been here at April 2011, Black Off Radio, which had planned a conference, and Mark was coming anyway to the island to speak to John Armstrong. And we thought today I'd talk to him about his interest in the JFK assassination, and also he runs the Dealey Plaza Echo, which is a magazine put out not quarterly, 3 times a year?
3 times a year, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so Mark, it's a pleasure to be with you here. Tell me a little bit about your interest in the JFK assassination, what got you interested, and then we'll discuss the Dealey Plaza Echo and things that we have mutual interest in.
Sure, yeah. My interest goes way back to when I was just a teenager, living in Toronto. My dad collected all the old newspapers from the JFK assassination. And as a teenager, while other teens were out playing maybe road hockey or whatever, I was down in my dad's basement, crawl space, looking at old JFK newspapers and Life magazines and the sort. And for some reason, I became really interested in the whole topic and started to read up on it, and I have been doing so for over 25 years.
Right. It seems to some as maybe one of the greatest murder mysteries, that there seems to be a lot of information out there, and yet they blamed Lee Oswald. The Warren Commission said they had this case, but as people look into it and read whatever magazine articles, there's always, there's room for doubt that how can this be true? How can that be true? So it goes on. Okay, so you said you were from Toronto, then you moved to England?
Yes, 2000, I moved over to the UK, and I'm actually started lecturing there, senior lecturer in film studies. So my background is film studies. I have a PhD in film practice, of which I've applying those theoretical models to practice-based filmmaking, and that leads into a series of documentaries that I'm currently beginning to produce.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, when you got there, did you the Dealey? We might as well just mention it again. The Dealey Plaza Echo, then, right?
Yeah, that
this
actually
is Dealey Plaza UK.
That's correct.
So you're in England now teaching film studies, and how did you come across this group of researchers in the UK?
Well, actually, Len, I was actually listening to one of your shows. I was living at the time in Plymouth, down in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, and I listened to your show, and I believe maybe Ian Griggs was on.
Okay, right.
And Ian Griggs is the founder of Dealey Plaza UK.
Right.
And I believe it's been an organization running for about 15 years now. And then I just rang up, and I thought, this is wonderful. So I joined the
So you just
group.
phoned them, and it was thanks to Black Op Radio. It was a catalyst that you guys connected. So there is a lot of interest in the UK, and there's a research group, and that the name then, in case anyone didn't know, is Dealey Plaza UK.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, Ian Griggs, I guess he was probably retiring around that time.
Well, he's just, after about 2 or 3 years ago, he retired. A gentleman named Stuart Galloway now is the chair of the organization, and I just took over as the editor of the Dealey Plaza Echo. We've got about, in terms of the Dealey Plaza UK group, we've got about 50 UK members from a wide range of backgrounds, ex-police detectives, firemen, teachers, bus drivers, quite a wide range, eclectic range of individuals. And we have about 12 American members. And my goal now is taking over the Dealey Plaza Echo magazine. Before it was more of a photocopied type of periodical, like a newsletter format. And now what I've done is I've revamped it, and I've sent you a copy. I put on a nice cover, glossy cover. We're trying to make it more appealing to a wider range audience, including the American audience.
Right.
We'd really like to get the magazine out there. And what I'd like to propose is that if anyone would like to contact me, I would be willing to send them a free copy of the magazine. Normally the magazine is free. It comes with a 1-year membership. If you take a 1-year membership with Dealey Plaza UK, of which we have a U.S. membership secretary in California that the Americans, U.S. citizens can join.
Right, and the magazine is the Dealey Plaza Echo.
That's correct, yes. And it's cutting-edge research, and we're combining American and UK writers, as well as any other researchers around the world who would like to submit articles. But if anyone would like a free copy now to get a flavor of it, if they could I give my email address?
Oh, yeah, we'll have a link to it.
Okay,
I'll have a link to it by the notes of this
And they
interview.
can send me, and I will send them a copy to see if they'd like to join.
Right. So typically, what would you find in the Echo here, the Dealey Plaza Echo? What kind of articles are people?
Yeah, an eclectic range. As for instance, some of the researchers you might know from the U.S., we've got James Fetzer and as well as Ian Griggs. Ian Griggs has written extensively on the Dallas Police Department, say, because he comes from that background. James Fetzer, as your audience knows, has edited a number of books, so he's got a current article in here. And Nancy Wyford has written a lot on George de Mohrenschildt, so we have an interesting expose on George de Mohrenschildt.
But not so much as this one. It's anyone doing new research. Yeah. This is what you're asking for.
Any new research, any articles, even retrospective, I'm willing to listen to, and hopefully we're going to have a book review for upcoming books.
So this is something that people would maybe consider,
becoming a member of, and then the magazine comes free with this.
Right, but I meant even submitting articles to you.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Right. Even if you're not a member, I'd be more than happy to submit articles, and I've got some planned for our next July issue. But if anyone would like to submit something beforehand, yeah.
Okay, right. So now let's talk a little bit about your interest in the assassination. So you teach film studies, so you're going to apply this to the research that you've been doing, which would be assassination items, and you're talking about making 4 films.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do and to counter the current
Vincent Bugliosi.
Vincent Bugliosi's 10-part miniseries with HBO, which will be narrated by Tom Hanks. What I propose is that much in the way that Jim Garrison requested rebuttal time from NBC when they did the hatchet job back on him in the late 60s by Walter Sheridan, he wrote to the FCC and asked for rebuttal time, and they gave him an hour, so he went on spoke. So what I'd like to do is approach HBO and say, listen, you're running this 10-part miniseries with Tom Hanks. We'd like to counter that as rebuttal for 1 hour. And what I propose is choose the generally what I consider and what I've tried to speak to other researchers, the most prolific, almost irrefutable type of evidence or research in 4 particular key areas. One.
Sure,
and,
let's
and
go
4
over
researchers.
What do you feel are the 4 areas that are worthy?
Currently, yes. Currently, right now, it's still work in progress, and if I'd subject to change and subject to confirmation, of course, from the authors and researchers. But I would really like to focus on John Armstrong's Harvey and Lee, which is an excellent book. For those who haven't got it, I believe if they get it, they can still get it through Andy Wisniewski at the Last Hurrah Bookshop. With Narschuk,
Right.
The Last Hurrah Bookshop, is that correct? He's got the last copies of that, and I've just come actually spend a bit of time with John Armstrong, so if anyone would like to get that book, it's excellent. The other one will be James Douglas's
JFK and the Unspeakable.
JFK and the Unspeakable.
Right.
That's the next one. And then Gerald McKnight's Breach of Trust, his in-depth research, one of the top books on the Warren Commission.
The Warren Commission.
And then the medical evidence, which will be comprised of two researchers and PhD candidates of PhD, Dr. David Mantek and Gary Aguilar. So by using those 4 elements, the 4 strongest I consider, and I'm still open for ideas, but if those will be the strongest pillars, I believe, to present to the public to counter the Bugliosi.
It's an antidote.
Yes. That's so. What we're doing now is we're planning that for the 50th anniversary, 2013, later in the fall of 2013, when the HBO special. So we'll give it a go. We'll see what happens. Again, this is much lower budget than the HBO. But I think if we have enough solid information, and we make it in an interesting and simple way that people can understand, perhaps HBO will go for it, and if not, we'll still put it on YouTube and so forth and get it out there.
Right. Now, as a filmmaker, I call myself a filmmaker, but I've dabbled in it, so I understand. I got a good grasp of the gigantic effort you're about to take on. What's a motivating factor? Like, a lot of people have an interest in this, so is there something here? Is it Bugliosi's book, and is that just you've taken that as an insult? Motivating enough to want you to counter?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the Bugliosi book is just basically a rehash of the Warren Commission, propping up of the Warren Commission.
that's an apologist, but that's not the right term for it.
Yeah.
But yeah. And of course, I think people listening to Black Op Radio probably have that view that, there's so much information out there. Jim Garrison's trial and Oliver Stone's depiction of that on film, it was a great first step.
Yeah.
So these 4 segments that you're making, but it does seem like a gigantic effort. Like, why did you not just pick one?
Well, because I figured HBO was doing 10, and then if you just did one, it would be too watered down. And that comes from a discussion I had with John Armstrong. If you just do elements of it, they really need an in-depth analysis. And to be honest, even an hour is not really justice.
No, I know. Yeah.
In the scheme
exactly
of things,
by the criticism of Jesse Ventura's 1-hour show. He said, here's 1 hour, and people say, well, it's cut too fast, and they have to leave out, and it's it's got to be action-packed. So here, this is more documentary style. Then
it'll be documentary style and drawing on irrefutable evidence and documentation.
Right.
Will not focus so much on conjecture and possibilities, but drawing from the best evidence we have, the hard evidence from those who've studied it. As an example, the Harvey and Lee, John Armstrong took 12 years to write that and research that.
When you're talking about you just spent time in the Hawaiian Islands there with John Armstrong, what's your impression of John and the work, his book and his work? Obviously, I think you were telling me he took like 12 years to get that book going.
12 years on his own expense, actually. And John doesn't, he's not seeking publicity. It was already difficult for him even to put his name on the book. But he did so. He's never sought publicity. What he would like is to present the research and documentation that there were 2 Oswalds. One he calls Harvey, which was the Russian-speaking guy who was killed, and Lee. Yeah. And he's done a fantastic job of doing parallel timelines on a number of key areas. One are the 2 Oswald families. One is on the Mexico City trip. One is on the rifle, and one is Oswald in the military. So those 4 pillars within that particular documentary I will look at for that 1 hour. And so, yes, John spent 12 years at his own expense. He published the book in China even. He went to China to do that because it was more cost-effective to do that. So he gave up his work for a bit, or he put it on hold for 12 years. Fortunately for him, he was in a has the financial wherewithal to do that. So, So well done for him to follow on that, and it's definitely a must-read book, Len. It's an excellent book.
Right, and many people have heard of Lee Oswald and an imposter. So this is taking it a bit further. But when you hear people posing as Lee Oswald, that's when you want to rely on what the documents. What did people actually say? And, of course, he's taking it a bit further. He's saying this was planned. There was, always meant to be various people who could be set up as patsies. Yeah. And there might be several people who've got, dual identities or people who are ready to step in,
Absolutely. You can clearly see from the evidence, and John draws from Warren Commission testimony. Right. And the way they replaced all those 4 elements that I just mentioned, how the Warren Commission, who they've interviewed, school records, where the families moved to, as an example, as well as the documentation as an example of the ordering of the Mantlicker Carcano and the money order that was used, which has no bank stamps on the back, so it was never cashed.
Right.
It was also even produced a week before he even ordered it. So that kind of documentation where the audience will get a chance to look at it, they will hear the witness statements, and then the audience can draw their own conclusions from the evidence that is presented to them.
Right. And I think you also were previously mentioning just the fact that if there's Lee Oswald and there's another imposter or impersonator or doppelganger or whatever, Harvey Lee, it's hard to talk about them without actually maybe having some kind of film and visualization of, someone lived here and then they lived here and they moved here and they moved here, and that's where your effort would help unconfuse the facts, because I'm saying, now, who lived in New Orleans, and when did they move to Dallas, and what they both did, and show me. And if I found it a bit confusing just talking about it, but as you explained, you got a plan once you make it in film and you're able to have animation and show different routes and things like that. That's something that should go over good. And there's a lot to back that up. I think a lot of people have heard of John Armstrong without actually getting into the depth of the material he has.
Yeah, again, you have to spend time with it. Yes, even for myself, It's still quite convoluted. But after spending this recent time with John, we went through it over a number of days, and he went through each one of those pillars one by one, talked me through the whole thing, and then it becomes very clear. It's like, you go, oh my God, the light bulbs go off. And it's backed up by documents and testimony. And it becomes very clear that there were two individuals using the same identification, being moved around with two families.
You know, and even if someone would say, well, I find that unusual, just the fact that when you know as a fact, Lee Oswald himself called himself Alec Heidel. So when you've got a library card, Alec Heidel, Lee Oswald, my famous line I love is when the police are interrogating him, they say, well, who are you? You know, Alec Heidel or Lee Oswald? And he replies, you're the cop, you figure it out.
That's right, I was right in the Oliver Stone film. That was a good scene.
But not only in the film, it's actually fact. That actually happened. And what I find intriguing about that, you know, if I had been arrested for a parking ticket and I'm taken to police headquarters, I'd be a little nervous. If I'm arrested and the president's killed and Tippett's killed, and you're sitting there and saying, listen, I'm going to be out of here in an hour. I don't care. I've gone through this before. I know what to expect. I'm on some kind of intelligence duty. Trading. You're the cop. You figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're nervous and scared, you just don't. I mean,
well, if you consider, a 24-year-old guy who had that much composure, and also, as we know, some of the phone calls he made to certain individuals, certain lawyers, and so forth, which they listened in on. I mean, you're definitely talking connections to intelligence agencies, and I think that's John Armstrong's thesis, that Oswald, or the two Oswalds, it's all leads back to the CIA.
Among the people who are in the research community, and we all have an interest just in the topic, still there's, stories like, when you talk about testimony, did the car actually come to a stop in Dealey Plaza? Did it come to a stop, or did it just slow down? You start getting witness statements and you find it, 50 people said it came to a stop. Then you look at the Zapruder film and it doesn't stop. Then that's where you get other people saying, well, can we trust it? And then you get articles and people writing, and can we trust it? Well, I'm not sure. But what I find of interest is, I just, I like to look into it, and I've been interested in the topic for a long time, and I don't have my mind made up. I don't say, well, the Zapruder film is complete fraud, or it's just been edited, or anywhere in between. I'm saying, well, let's just keep looking at it until we, as a group, can say, these are the facts.
Yeah.
These are the facts that we can tell. Frames have been removed, so backwards, anything. And, unfortunately, we're not really in any bit of evidence able to say that, this is the case. I mean, even Exhibit 399. Did that bullet do anything or not? I mean, common sense tells you it didn't, but the whole Warren Commission case is built on that. I think you remove Commission Exhibit 399, you say, well, we can't be sure that bullet did anything. It was found on a stretcher, not even the right stretcher. I mean, it's planted. I mean, then that's not a lone assassin. And
that can lead, that obviously would lead to the notion of conspiracy, which is when two or more people plan to commit an illegal act. So it's not rocket science, and it's terminology is on the law books everywhere.
So I guess I was just a little interested as well, because I was just commenting on the motivation it would take for someone to start 4 one-hour films almost simultaneously on different subcategories, although they're the topic of the assassination of a president. So,
I mean, in a way that The Men Who Killed Kennedy, which was now 20-odd years ago.
The Nigel Turner film.
Yeah, Nigel Turner, who's from the UK as well. This is the next kind of step in that process. We've had the Oliver Stone film, which is a great primer. And I think now, if we still keeping these programs simple, enough for the general audience to understand, but now we take it to the next level. We're going to give you some dynamic, in-depth, documented research that can put together some of the more the deeper undertones of the elements that we're having, and which were alluded to in the film JFK. and by many such as Fletcher Prouty, and they've alluded to a number of these elements. We even have like James Douglas, his book.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And that's, I guess, a problem. I hate to say it's a failing, because as just hosting Black Op Radio, I like to promote anyone doing anything good. So when I said, I watched Jesse Ventura's show, some people had complaints about it. I thought, well, it's out there, right? So for anyone complaining, what are you doing? So of course there's failings, and E. Howard Hunt's confession, I think they made more of it in that film than other people thought. I didn't mind seeing it. I didn't really subscribe to that. The two things I took away was he was speaking about something called the event, the big event, and he was also mentioning, look, I was a bench warmer on that. I was going to be called if needed, and I knew other people were running it. Yeah. We knew all about it. And so I thought, well, that's a confirmation just in that they knew of an operation going on, and he was a bench warmer. Yeah. And that's what I left it alone at that, right? I thought, fair enough. So when we're talking about Vince Bugliosi in a 10-hour miniseries, God, I shudder to see the lies of that. But so we can look forward to this 4-part rebuttal. And it could be that already people say, well, your 4 categories, I don't agree with them.
That's true. Yeah, you're going to have, in any kind of community, in the research community, you're going to have a varied range of opinion. And as you know, not all the researchers get along on many of the finer points, but we have a general overall concept of where the evidence is leading. And then, as you know, each researcher tends to focus on a particular area. So I've chosen the elements that I thought would be most understandable to a more general audience, as well as of interest to researchers who may have not gone into the same depth as like a John Armstrong.
Let me stop you there. Can you pinpoint any reason why you think the community is not more unified? Why there isn't a camaraderie between people? Because if I mention Jim Douglas's book, people say, yes, that's good. Yes, we like that. Yeah. That's, regardless of any flaw, that's such a step in the right direction. Yet, trying to put on a Hawaii conference and things like that, I found bitter rivalries in that. And so I'm just asking you, do you have...
Well, I think why that occurs is that people become entrenched in certain... they felt they've uncovered certain research, and they're quite passionate about it, and that's a good sign. And people tend to, just the human nature is that defend their position. That's not an unreasonable human reaction. You tend to defend it. Some people can adopt more of the other another individual's perception and reading of evidence. And it's because we're all individuals, it varies so much. So what one person digs their heels in on, another researcher can say, you know what, I don't necessarily agree with it, but like as you say, Len, you're open. I feel I'm open. I may feel the Zapruder film has been tampered with, but I understand perhaps why Robert Garodin would suggest that no, it hasn't been, and he firmly and passionately believes that it hasn't been.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, perhaps John Costella, who's also made some fair arguments, but again, I'm open. My
it's
personal
funny,
thing
though,
as a filmmaker, I do see anomalies in it just from a cinematic point of view.
But I was going to say, when I met John Costella, it's kind of funny when I speak to people one-on-one, and that very reasonable people, and there's no problem. And like you mentioned, tampered. Like when someone says something's been tampered, these X-rays cannot be the proper X-rays. These cannot be the true photos. A photo of the back of the Kennedy's head, and there's a little tiny dot there, and like the doctor said, well, who washed his hair? It wasn't like that, Yeah. So we can say there's tampering, and yet you would think people should, okay, well, let's take it to each degree. We agree there's some tampering here. Does that mean it's a complete animation? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would tend to say it wouldn't be a complete animation. Again, sometimes it boils down to terminology, and different people have different perception of terminology and vocabulary and language. It depends too, right? Like you said, some people might argue that's a complete animation, but what does animation mean? Okay, maybe there was some, old-style CGI painting on it, or maybe there wasn't, but there also may have been some, filming on top of filming. Of course, the technology was around back then in the early 60s. It wasn't rocket science, easily done.
But, the first time I saw just the blow-up of 313, I remember... And I was mentioning I'm a little bit of an amateur 8mm film aficionado, yeah. And I was thinking, that doesn't look right. I've seen a lot of frozen frames, stills.
Yeah.
I've seen, that just doesn't look right. And I didn't give it any more attention.
Yeah.
Well, looking back, I remember thinking, my first impression was there's something wrong there. And, I like the word tampering. But I mean, look, there's going to be a personality. Like, say I speak to Jim DiEugenio one-on-one, or David Lifton, or Pat Valentino, or other people that say, well, we're open.
Yeah.
Talk me into it, explain your position.
Yeah.
But when I hear about the forums and the John Simpkin forum, and he's in the UK, correct?
Yeah, that's correct,
So,
yes. Yeah.
Bitter fighting.
Yeah.
And
well, that's the unfortunate reality of it. I personally tend not to get too involved in that because it serves no purpose in the end to take a hard position. I mean, arguing your position passionately is fair enough, but it's also, I would imagine, I believe that you need to be open to hear other sides. And you can go, okay, I don't agree with that. But I think overall, generally, Len, the consensus is there. And then you can have within that, like in any institution, including even in the intelligence factions, there's going to be personality conflicts, and that's human nature.
Yeah.
So if we understand that these elements of human nature exist, then maybe perhaps they shouldn't bother us so much, and we shouldn't get so wrapped up into, raising our voice louder than the other guy on these forums.
Right. Words of wisdom, but yet still 12 years into it, I don't hear it. And I know I was speaking about someone I knew, that Greg Burnham had done a lot of research, and then finally he kind of said, it's taking up too much time, I got to pull out. So, it takes off for a while. Same thing we said with John Armstrong, did a lot of research and said, I got to take a break, right?
Yeah, and that's not unreasonable. I mean, some people, even like Oliver Stone, they feel they've done their bit, and they have. And really, that's more than enough. If they come back, that's wonderful. If not, that's okay, because I mean, again, only because I've just recently been with John Armstrong. He mentioned he wants others to take his research and go take it to the next level. So go with it, and his thing is, his mantra is stick with the documentation and the witness reports, and focus on Oswald leading back to the CIA. And that's a CIA operation who put the Oswald, or whether it's one Oswald or two Oswalds, it's still an operation. They put them together, move them around the chessboard, as the Oliver Stone film alludes to. And then, of course, everything else from CE 399 to frame 313 to the autopsy photos. All of that takes planning, even post job planning, post the big show planning. You've got to get in there and make these things. You can't just waltz in there and start changing these things. You have to have people in power positions, particularly even with the FBI doing the field work. Still had to be, as an example, Hoover had to be given instructions by whatever CIA faction to go and get the evidence and get on top of it, point it to Oswald.
Now, as you said, just as a kid reading Life and various articles about the assassination that kind of seemed to have this, I think, attachment to it, a great murder mystery, because a lot of people, offhand, I don't know if the number is 75 or 80%, they don't feel Lee Oswald did it, and they kind of say, well, yeah, it was a kangaroo court, that Warren Commission. Alan Dulles, that wasn't the guy Kennedy fired, and he's in charge of the Warren Commission? Oh, come on, So when they hear that, is there any catalyst or one item that really catapulted you, inspired you to say, I'm going to pick this up? And
again, it's a combination with my film background, because I have not done particular original research, but what I like to do is build on research that's there, and my forte being cinema, that's a way I can contribute.
No, I meant, is there
a particular
thing that is it the Bugliosi book that sparked you into action?
Oh, for these particular
so
documentaries.
I'm saying maybe you read something, you said, well, when I read Jack Ruby's testimony, that's when I realized I got to get into this case.
Well, I always actually, going way back to high school, before even Oliver Stone film, I was going to make a Super 8 film.
Oh, okay.
And that was way back in the late 70s. I've always wanted to make something about the JFK, but you get on with life and you get into job and
so
things.
That's what I was alluding to. Was it?
But now it was the impetus. You're correct. Was the Bugliosi once you've been talking about on Black Op Radio on 10-part miniseries? I put in my head, you know what? Rebuttal. Let's give a rebuttal thing like Jim Garrison did, and this will be an opportunity now for me to step in and then use what skills I have to try and produce these documentaries. After previous good works have gone in the past, many documentaries, and The Men Who Killed Kennedy. You may not agree with all of them that Nigel Turner did, but this is hopefully it's the next evolution. But making it so simplified so that the individual audience members, the general public, can understand it, but on another level, not just beyond the Oliver Stone film level, which is generalities and a very good primer.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's building the consciousness as it spreads. Right. The collective consciousness. More and more people jumping on the bandwagon, and then hopefully with the magazine too. That is a forum. This is the only magazine of its kind that's looking at the JFK assassination
right now.
Yeah. So, and there's we need to get more American readers involved, and we're going to try and get it out there and worldwide. Because, as we know, it's not just the Kennedy assassination as some historical element that happened 50 years ago. It's a microcosm for where we are today, in a sense, and the things that are going on.
Well, I'm gonna cut to some freeze frames right in the video of this. Okay. I'll put that in. But Dealey Plaza. So we're looking at, March, April, May. This interview is going to be coming out around May 2011. Yeah. So your next issue is going to be when?
In July.
July.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can attract some more subscriptions.
July and November. So either one, if people are working on anything, yes.
Right. Okay. And this was something started, you just mentioned too, by Ian Griggs for about 15 years.
Yes, and the previous editor, Mark Bridger, did it for 5 years, and now he's moving on, and I've just taken over. This is the first new issue, but we've made it more a magazine.
Stuart
Galloway is the chair of Dealey Plaza UK, and this is the magazine that accompanies the membership. Right.
Which brings me to what I wanted to speak about, that Dealey Plaza UK has small conferences, and I don't want to say so. They have conferences.
An annual conference, that's correct.
Which you just had one?
Yes, we just had every April. I think the second or third week of April, just before Easter, there's an annual conference, much in the same way as the two conferences run in Dallas, the COPA and the Lancer.
Right.
So we have our local researchers, as well as we bring in generally American researchers.
Right.
This year we did have Gerald McKnight, who wrote The Breach of Trust, come over. And so he was our American visitor this year. And Larry Hancock, who wrote Someone Would Have Talked. And he's actually connected to the Lancer.